Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Can I ask you to take your seats? Let's start. The session adjourned on the 19th of June 2025 is reopened. The minutes and the texts adopted of the sitting of the 19th of June are available. Are there any comments? That does not seem to be the case. Okay, they are approved. I have a couple of announcements. Can I please ask you to take your seats? Let's continue. The EPP, ECR and Renew Europe groups have notified me of decisions relating to changes to appointments within committees and delegations. These decisions will be set out in the minutes of today's sitting and take effect on the date of this announcement. Several committees have decided to enter interinstitutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 72, paragraph 1. The reports which constitute the mandate for the negotiations are available on the plenary webpage, and the titles will be published in the minutes of the sitting. Pursuant to Rule 72, paragraph 2, members of political groups reaching at least the medium threshold may request in writing by tomorrow, Tuesday the 8th of June at midnight, that the decisions be put to the vote. If no request for a vote in Parliament is made within the deadline, the committees may start the negotiations. I was informed that no objections have been raised within the Conference of Committee Chairs to the recommendation by the INTA Committee not to oppose a delegated act pursuant to Rule 114, paragraph 6 of our rules. The recommendation is available on the plenary webpage. If no objections are raised by a political group or members reaching at least the low threshold within 24 hours, the recommendation shall be deemed to have been approved. The Libe and Juri committees have transmitted a corrigendum to a text adopted by the Parliament. Pursuant to Rule 2514, this corrigendum will be deemed approved unless no later than 24 hours after its announcement a request is made by a political group or members reaching at least the low threshold that it be put to the vote. The corrigendum is available on the plenary webpage. Its title will be published in the minutes of this sitting. I would like to inform you that since the adjournment of Parliament session on the 19th of June, I have signed, together with the President of the Council, 2 acts adopted under the ordinary legislative procedure in accordance with Rule 81 of Parliament's rules. The titles of the acts will be published in the minutes of this sitting. We now come to the order of business. The final draft agenda, as adopted by the Conference of Presidents, is on the 2nd of July, pursuant to Rule 163, has been distributed. We will have, dear colleagues, as a point of information, the Srebrenica commemoration, after which immediately the debate on the motion of censure of the Commission as the first items on the agenda. So due to these 2 points, I will only be taking the points of order that have come in after the debate on the motion of censure. In this regard, a point has been raised by Ms. Anderson on the matter of the debate on the motion of censure. To that, I would like to emphasize that Rule 131 provides for a debate on motions of censure, which includes 1 round of political group speakers. Therefore, in accordance with provisions of that rule, and as decided by the Conference of Presidents, the debate will take place in the form of 1 round of political group speakers. We will now move to the order of the agenda. I would like to inform you that I have received from the Greens Group the following request for urgent procedure pursuant to Rule 170, paragraph 5, European climate law. The vote on this request will be taken tomorrow. If adopted, the vote will be added to the draft agenda of a future part session. For Wednesday, the Left Group has requested that Parliament's statements on alleged misuse of EU funds by members of the far right and measures to ensure institutional integrity be added as the 5th point in the afternoon. As a consequence, the sitting would be extended to 11 p.m. I give the floor to Mr. Schilderwan to move the request.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Wir haben in den letzten Tagen
Madam President, over the last few days in the media we heard that there's an internal audit report for the European Parliament, and that states that the former right-wing group, the ID group, took 4.3 million euros and used them for inappropriate purposes, for expensive advertising contracts or financing dodgy organizations close to their politics. That shows the real values of those who want to sell themselves as honest politicians. Illegal party financing and corruption. I think that the Parliament rather, should take this opportunity to deal with this misuse of public money. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone who would like to speak against? No? All right, then we put the request of the left group to a vote by roll call. Vote is open. Vote is closed. And it is adopted, and therefore the agenda is so amended. Now we move to the next item of the agenda, which is a statement by myself on the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. I would like to inform members that there will only be one round of political group speakers for this debate. There is no catch the eye and no blue cards will be accepted. After my statement, I will give the floor for each political group speaker. So, dear colleagues, this week marks 30 years since the Srebrenica genocide, where thousands of Bosnian Muslims were murdered or disappeared, and tens of thousands more were forcibly expelled from the enclave. Tragically, many victims remain unidentified. With us today are two survivors of the massacre, Almasa Salihovic and Almir Salihovic. Almasa was displaced from her community and only later discovered that her older brother Abdullah was executed, and Almir trudged for 6 days through the forest to escape the killing. Almasa and Almir, I would like to thank you for being here. You remind us that behind every name and number Dear Almasa and Almir, you remind us that behind every name and number there is a person, there is a family. This House honors you and all survivors, just as we continue to keep the memories of the victims alive. And in the words of the Srebrenica prayer recited every year, may mothers' tears become prayers that Srebrenica never happens again. Now I would like to open the floor for a round of political group speakers. We start with the EPP group, Andrzej Kolar.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, this week we commemorate the horrors that happened 30 years ago in Srebrenica and those who have lost their lives only because they believed in something else than their murderers. We have spent these 30 years convincing ourselves that nothing like that should happen again, only to watch new atrocities happening around the world. The innocent lives that were lost in Srebrenica should remind us every day that hatred and lack of pardon only make ground for new conflicts, for new grief, and for new sorrow. They should remind us that it is not enough to condemn these things once they happen, but that we should find all the courage that we once had to prevent them from happening. Not only the innocent victims deserve that, but also the generations that will come after us. They should see that there is no space for intolerance, hatred, and savagery. They should see that we have the strength to strike upon those who are committed to destroying human lives rather than working for a secure and safe future for everyone. Bosnia and Herzegovina has suffered a lot in the past. Now it is up to us to help the country and its people to live in peace and prosperity. It is our duty to help them secure their European future. Molim vás, nedozvolite da ovih 8.000 duš.
Please don't allow these 8,000 victims to be forgotten.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kollar. I give the floor now on behalf of the S&D Group to Matthias Nemec.
Madam President, August Assembly, on the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, we are remembering over 8,000 Bosniak civilians whom the Serb forces killed in cold blood in Bosnia and Herzegovina in front of the eyes of the world. It all began with a rhetoric dangerously similar to the one used by nationals today against minorities. Yet Srebrenica was only the culmination of the genocidal campaign led by the then Serb authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina against Bosniaks. Before that, numerous killings of innocent civilians elicited only empty calls for ceasefire in the international community. It wasn't until the genocide in Srebrenica, which had been going on for a long time, did the international community wake up. We took decisive action then, and after 3 years, halted the killings of innocent people. We said, never again. Yet, today, Europe is feigning ignorance again, the name of which Palestinian town will have to be written in blood in history books of our humanity for us to move from words to action. By attaching new symbols on our jackets, the symbol I am wearing, we will not clear our conscience, ladies and gentlemen. The obligation of preventing genocide mustn't just be a dead letter. We have to act now. All the victims of the genocide in Srebrenica oblige us to do that. Good luck, European Union.
I give the floor now on behalf of the PFV Group to Herman Terch.
Thank you, President. 30 years ago in Srebrenica, the worst massacre since the Second World War took place in Europe. Serbian forces grouped together all the adults and teenagers who had a different faith to their own, Muslims in the Bosnian community in Srebrenica. They took the women to one side. They opened up some graves and started killing in a way the Nazis did in eastern Poland. There was official UN protection, but we all know what actually happened. The war didn't end for a long time. It was thanks to US intervention. We should recall that. It wasn't thanks to Europe. Europe failed appallingly at the time. There was a court, and people were held accountable. That did happen for the first time. They were held to account. But this inappropriate use of genocide that people are using now. We've had genocides in Europe, and Europe has to fight such spirits, not with communism, but with strength.
Of the ECR Group, Sebastian Tynkynen.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, 30 years ago, Europe witnessed some of the darkest days in its modern history. The people of Srebrenica were subjected to unimaginable horrors by soldiers of the Bosnian Serb army who engaged in systematic execution of civilians. Over 8,000 men and young boys killed. After all the violence, rape and killing, even more souls were shattered forever. The Srebrenica massacre is a reminder to all that Europe must work together to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. We pride ourselves in peace and democracy, values that we must protect. Outside actors who are engaged in a systematic effort to destroy these values must be stopped and held accountable. This is our duty. I would like to end by expressing my sincerest respects on behalf of the ECR Group to the victims of Srebrenica and their loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now on behalf of the Renew Europe Group, Helmut Brandstetter.
Madam President, dear colleagues, I've been to Srebrenica. I know how much the pain is there if you look in the eyes of the relative of the countless victims. It was predominantly men who were killed, but also women and children. They had endured unimaginable horrors. The pain remains a stark reminder of those terrible days of July 1995. Some of the Bosnian perpetrators, including the leader Ratko Mladic, they are still behind bars for their crimes. And the Serbian people, I ask the Serbian people, please understand what happens. Open your eyes, acknowledge the past, and engage with the victims of this genocide. Accepting the truth is the first step toward healing. We Europeans, we strive for unity, embracing our diversity and history to forge a peaceful future together. And I can tell you as an Austrian, also we in Austrian, we had a hard time, a difficult time to accept the rule of Austrians in the Holocaust. But it was so important to acknowledge this painful truth. It was essential for understanding of our past, but also of our common future here in Europe. The events in Srebrenica have been ruled a genocide by international courts. We honor the victims, I bow my head, and solemnly declare never again. Yet, even today, we witness similar atrocities when we look to Ukraine, what some Russians are doing there. They remind us that the shadows of genocide still loom. We have an exhibition on the other side of the bridge in the Churchill building. Thank you, Madam President, for opening it tomorrow, and thank you for the people from the Memory Center of Srebrenica for working there. I really ask you, go there, look at it, and let's repeat it never again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Greens Group, Tineke Strik.
Dear Chair, Council, Commissioner, I'd like to thank our President for this commemoration, and special thank, of course, to Almasa and Almir for their presence and their wonderful work. On Friday, we commemorate how 30 years ago in Srebrenica, 8,000 Bosnian men and boys were brutally killed by the Bosnian Serb army in what was the most recent genocide on European soil. The years before, we witnessed acts of ethnic cleansing and desperate calls for help. But even the safe haven finally created by the UN soldiers failed to protect them against slaughter, torture, rape, and expulsion. We bear a heavy responsibility to learn from this failure, and we must therefore prevent the ongoing genocide in Gaza. But also, we must ensure not to let down the Bosnian people again. The ongoing ethno-nationalistic rhetoric, threats and genocide denial keep their fears and traumas alive. They need our support in the recognition of genocide, accountability for war criminals, and reconciliation. These are the basic conditions for a democratic and stable Bosnia-Herzegovina, where everyone enjoys safety and equal rights regardless of their background. Helping them in achieving this as an essential step towards EU membership would be the most meaningful way to honour the memory of the victims.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the Left Group, Sebastian Everding.
Dear colleagues, we are here today in order to commemorate the most awful atrocity since the end of the Second World War. 8,000 people systematically executed, many of them minors under the age of 12, and simply because they were Bosniak Muslims. Any life lost in this way would be a life too many, so it's not even a question of numbers. In addition to which, many of these individuals have not been found. Their remains are still to be found. We are still discovering mass graves. Nobody will forget what happened in July 1995. Those responsible have been found guilty. The United Nations has acknowledged this, and the Netherlands have apologised. But young, inexperienced soldiers were deployed in this area. They themselves were victims. They are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a very, very serious incident that has made reconciliation difficult, and yet it is the only way forward. We need to remember, we need to learn our lessons from this atrocity. That's the only way of moving forward. We need to learn from Srebrenica. Humanitarian crises, such as the one in Gaza right now, cannot be ignored. Therefore, dear colleagues, ne zaboravimo Srebrenicu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last member to take the floor on behalf of the ESN is Alexander Sell.
8,000 Bosnian Muslims were killed by Bosnian Serbs under the eyes of the blue helmets from the UN. That's 30 years ago. Srebrenica is one of the worst atrocities against humanity since the end of the Second World War. People have talked about the failures of the international community and the Dutch peacekeeping troops, but that's false. The Americans, the French, and the British had agreed that they would have no air raids on the Bosnian Serbs. The Dutch and the Bosnian Muslims were delivered to the hands of the Bosnian Serbs. So we have to look at how power is used. There is no international order without a force of order that can guarantee that order. The strong do what they want, and the poor must suffer what they must. That's the way it was 2,000 years ago, and it remains the case today. Europe needs to learn to defend itself so that such an event cannot happen again. We have to forget unrealistic dreams, and this is not the approach of our Commission.
That concludes this round, so we will go next to the debate on the motion of censure. Would like to inform members that there will be only one round of political group speakers for this debate. Therefore, there is no catch-the-eye procedure and no blue cards will be accepted. As I said earlier, the rules have been very strictly and carefully applied, but I understand Ms. Anderson still would like to make a point of order on the motion. Okay, quickly.